As you all know, God has many ways to transport himself in the earthly realm or around our atmosphere from the third heaven, and I'm going to prove that to you on this podcast. As you also know very well, he used to transport himself on a pillar in the cloud to the ancient Israelites with Moses. And then later on, he was also transported on top of the Ark of the Covenant, where the two cherubims were. And it's interesting because I read in a passage in the Bible that he would ride upon the cherubim, And so I tried to imagine or try to picture this in my mind. And I said, well, he's not going to be piggybacking on a cherub, So instinctively, I knew then that the cherubims would transform or shapeshift into a sort of flying machine. And this is why, on this podcast, I want to tell you Ezekiel's vision, God's spaceship identified. Please join me on this fascinating topic, which is part one of a fascinating series which I have called the UFO series. The New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries present the Messenger of the Lord with Apostle Cherubim, preaching the gospel of the good news of the kingdom of God and informing you about world events in the light of Bible prophecy and preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Apostle Cherubim. And greetings, friends. Of the many fascinating scriptural descriptions of heavenly things, chapters 1 and 10 of Ezekiel is by far the most stunning and complex. Ezekiel had to describe in the Hebrew language something he saw, something so incredible and foreign as to defy description. Yet describe it he did. Though the account leaves modern commentaries equally confused, with some indulging in various allusions on the subject. If we really want to understand what Ezekiel experienced, we need to allow the Bible to be our guide. Ezekiel begins by describing an incredibly fiery spectacle. And I looked, and behold, a whirlwind came out of the north, a great cloud, and a fire enfolding itself, a fire inside a fire, and a brightness was about it, and out of the midst thereof as the color of amber, out of the midst of the fire. Verse 4. This was some of the most intense brightness you can imagine. A mass of fire concentrated in a vast cloud, so that the flames might be more accurately and distinctly observable. Yet the fire never escaped from the cloud, according to Adam Clarke's commentary. The fire enfolding forms a circle of light with flames that were moving round and round as flashes of light and following each other in rapid succession, according to Barnes' commentary. The color of amber in the center of the cloud is from the Hebrew word translated as very bright and made of gold and brass, according to John Gill's exposition of the Bible. So let's talk about the living creatures or cherubims. UFO enthusiasts describe the vision as a perennial example of ancient contact with extraterrestrial beings, supposed alien astronauts who visited the Earth in antiquity. However, they gloss over some important facts in trying to tie down this vision into the physical sphere. Let's consider the living creatures or cherubs within the flaming cloud. Though having the form of men, they have two sets of wings, 4 faces, and feet like calves' hooves. Our aficionados believe that the 4 faces are the faces of different alien beings looking out of different windows of the spacecraft. This, however, is a somewhat crude and simplistic description, especially in light of Ezekiel being very precise and particular in describing what he saw. Also out of the midst thereof came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had the likeness of a man, and everyone had 4 faces, and everyone had 4 wings, and their feet were straight feet, and the sole of their feet was like the sole of a cat's foot, and they sparkled like the color of burnished brass, and they had the hands of a man under their wings, on their 4 sides, and they 4 had their faces and their wings. Their wings were joined one to another, they turned not when they went everyone straight forward. As for the likeness of their faces, they 4 had the face of a man, and the face of a lion on the right side, and they 4 had the face of an ox on the left side. They 4 also had the face of an eagle. Verses 5 through 10. By comparing the description of the living creatures in Ezekiel to that of the living creatures that surround the throne of God in Revelation 4, one quickly realizes that the scenes witnessed by Ezekiel were visions of God and his spiritual host of heaven. As with the cherubim flanking the Holy of Holies, the wings of the living creatures in Ezekiel's vision touch each other. This is why King Solomon overlays the cherubim with gold, while the living creatures sparkle like burnished bronze. The 4 faces of the creatures in Ezekiel's vision, 2, harken back to the cherubim and to Solomon's temple. Lions and bulls are frequently mentioned as part of the imagery of the temple interior, according to 1 Kings 7:25, 29, and 36. Cherubim were often depicted as having men's heads, the bodies of either lions or bulls. Sometimes a lion's 4 parts and a bull's hindquarters, hence the cat's feet of living creatures of Ezekiel 1:7, and the wings of eagles sprouting from their lion or bull shoulders. The ordinary angels apparently resemble men, but cherubim, Michael, or Gabriel are not ordinary angels. Everyone has 4 faces, so the living creatures of Ezekiel's vision were not bizarre 4-faced space aliens, nor were they neither a depiction of different alien species looking out of the portholes of a spaceship. They were cherubims. If those who want to see the living creatures as space aliens will read more of Ezekiel, they will find an almost identical vision in Ezekiel 10 verse 20. There the prophet clearly identifies the beings as cherubim, and says in verse 15 that they were the living beings he saw in his first vision. This is the living creature that I saw under the God of Israel by the river of Chebar, and I knew that they were the cherubim. All 4 were intertwined as one, for the wings were joined one to another. Ezekiel 1:9. The appearance of these living creatures, cherubim, was apparently highly impressive. They were lit up like fire, with lightning coming out of the fire. Not an ordinary sight. Their appearance was like burning coals of fire, and like the appearance of lamps. It went up and down among the living creatures, and the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. Verse 13. Now these cherubim had a job to perform, which meant they transported this vehicle, evidently at the speed of light. And the living creatures ran and returned as the appearance of a flash of lightning. Verse 14. And when they went, I heard the noise of their wings, like the noise of great waters, as the voice of the Almighty, the voice of speech, as the noise of an host. When they stood, they let down their wings. Verses 14 and 24. Ezekiel saw this great luminous vehicle with windows, and the wheels, or flying saucers, were full of eyes, windows run about, even the wheels that they 4 had. Ezekiel 10 verse 12. And revolving wheels moving at lightning speed. It never had to turn, it would move instantly in any direction, just like we see UFOs do. Like lightning darting around, this vehicle was so awesome Ezekiel had trouble even explaining it. The vision contained the throne and appearance of God. Now focus on the next couple of points because they are truly breathtaking. Ezekiel's vision included a view of God's throne. Then I looked, and behold, in the firmament that was above the head of the cherubims, there appeared over them as it were a sapphire stone, as the appearance of the likeness of a throne. Ezekiel 10 verse 1. Look closely at what was on top of God's amazing transportation system. And upon the likeness of the throne was the likeness of as the appearance of a man above upon it. Ezekiel 1:25-26. Imagine the great God of Ezekiel 1 sitting at his throne on top of this amazing transportation system. Looks like a man. Study Genesis 1 and you know that mortal man was made in the image and likeness of God. Is there a connection? Well, interestingly enough, last night I was watching a YouTube video that was explaining in a very remarkable way how all humans have the same numerical pattern and sequence in our DNA as the name of God, YHWH, has. How about that? Simply amazing, dumbfounding, and mind-boggling, isn't it? Do you want to know what God really looks like? Read on closely. And I saw as the color of amber, as the appearance of fire ran about within it, from the appearance of his loins even upward, and from the appearance of his loins even downward, I saw as it were the appearance of fire, and he had a huge brightness run about, as the appearance of the bow that is in the cloud in the day of rain, a rainbow, so was the appearance of the brightness run about. This was the appearance of the likeness of the glory of the Lord. And when I saw it, I fell upon my face, and I heard a voice of one that spake. Ezekiel 1:27-28. Compare this description with Revelation 1 to get an idea of how impressive God is to behold. This is the God of the Bible. This is not some nebulous cloud or a phony humanoid alien being. This is the God of the Bible. This is what he looks like and how he travels. Do you know this God? So let's talk about a wheel within a wheel, because there has been a lot of confusion about this term. In the book of Ezekiel, while the prophet Ezekiel was by the river Chebar, he saw revelations of God and his throne along with flying saucers that were guided by cherubim. Ezekiel 1:1. From verses 4-14, he describes the four living creatures or cherubim of God in full detail. Then in verses 15-21, this is what he describes. Now, as I beheld the living creatures, behold one wheel, flying saucer, upon the earth by the living creatures, with its four faces. The appearance of the wheels and their work was like unto the color of a beryl, and they four had one likeness, and their appearance and their work was as it were a small wheel in the middle of a bigger wheel. He is in fact describing a flying saucer. When they went upon their four sides, and they turned out when they went. As for the rings, a wheel inside a wheel, they were so high that they were very dreadful, and the rings were full of eyes round about them four, just like the flying saucer has windows around it. Introducing Apostle Yeshurun's new book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. The answers to life's enigmas, mysteries, puzzles, and riddles. Published author Cherubim brings to the reader in this fabulous work some of the most compelling and thought-provoking subjects and topics that will indeed enlighten you to a superb and amazing sort of compendium of knowledge and understanding, which is also intended to provide the reader with some real and very interesting answers to some of life's most difficult, hard, and intriguing questions. This work explores and will try to bring into light those most basic fundamental explanations to some of the most puzzling and trivial questions that humanity may ever ask about life itself, as well as other enigmas. Everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. You can get your copy at BarnesandNoble.com, Lulu.com, SweetPublishing.com, and get your copy today. Remember, everything that you never knew and you need to know about life. This book shows you some of the most fundamental things that you never knew and you need to know, like why are you here on this earth? What happens when you die? what's going to happen next. Is World War III going to happen very soon? And many, many other answers to life's most puzzling enigmas, mysteries, and riddles. You need to get this book, Everything That You Never Knew and You Need to Know About Life. You better get your copy today. Continuing now in verses 19 through 21, and when the living creatures went, the wheels went by them, just like you have police escorts today. And when the cherubim, the living creatures, were lifted up from the earth, the wheels were lifted up the same way that the fallen angels manipulate their flying saucers when they enter from the spiritual realm and dimension into the earth's atmosphere, and we call them UFOs. Whithersoever the spirit was to go, they went, thither was their spirit to go, and the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the cherubim or living creature was in the wheels. Angels are spirit beings that can transform and shapeshift into any object at will, as we will see ahead. When those went, this went, and when those stood, this stood, and when those were lifted up from the earth, then the wheels were lifted up over against them, for the spirit of the living creature was in the wheels, shapeshifted to a flying saucer. In chapter 2 verses 3 to 10 and chapter 3 verses 1 through 11, God gave instructions to the prophet Ezekiel that truly pertain to me in these end times. Since I was called by God to carry about the Ezekiel commission now at the time of the end, and the Elijah work as well, I believe that God will send one of these flying saucers or angels to me sometime in July, and they will fly me into Israel, as you can read in verses 14 through 15. So the Spirit took me up, compared with verse 20 of chapter 1, and took me away, just like God did with Enoch and Elijah before in ancient times. And I went in bitterness in the heat of my spirit, but the hand of the Lord was strong upon me. Then I came to them of the captivity at Tel Aviv, the old capital of Israel, that dwelt by the river of Chebar, and I sat where they sat and remained there astonished among them 7 days. So I guess this is how God plans to transfer me to Israel soon, so I could be there for 7 days waiting for my other partner and prophet to show up alongside with me, so we can fulfill the work of the two witnesses, just like the other two we have seen lately in Rome, dressed in sackcloth, as described in Revelation 11, 3 to 13. And I will give power unto my witnesses, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the two olive trees and the two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devour their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. So what is the significance of the wheels or flying saucers of the living creatures or cherubim? It may be that it is unusual for a wheel, spaceship, or flying saucer to be associated with our modern view of a throne. But I want you to take a look at the following scripture speaking of God. And he rode on his throne upon a cherub that had shapeshifted into a flying saucer, and did fly, yea, he did fly upon the wings of the wind. Psalm 18 verse 10. Or how about this one? There is none like unto the God of Cherubim, that's me, who rideth inside a cherub, turned and shapeshifted into a flying saucer, upon the heaven in thy help, and in his excellency on the sky. Deuteronomy 33 verse 26. Now, as far as the description of these flying saucers or wheels, the commentaries make it to be one traversing inside of the other. They determine 4 directions to which the spirit beings, shapeshifted into flying saucers, were darting to whatever direction they were commanded. Ezekiel 1:16 and 17. Without turning. As for the engineering aspect of the wheels, our human understanding can't help much, since we are dealing with supernaturally composed matter. The Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown commentary gives this description. Each wheel was composed of 2 circles cutting one another at right angles, one only of which appeared to touch the ground upon the earth. The biblical description, a wheel in the middle of a wheel, however, would indicate the one inside to be smaller than the other, just as we see in a regular flying saucer. You have a wheel on top of a bigger wheel. They're like fused Two more important facets are shown or depicted. The first facet is that the rings were full of eyes or lights, as you can probably notice in many flying saucers that you've seen. Verse 18. The other facet of the wheel was the rings or rims were high and dreadful. Verse 18. As far as the geometrical shape is concerned, it is not clear whether it means a fantastic size of spokes, wheel diametrically large, or the depth of the ring. So in conclusion, it's easy to speculate on the subject of this vision because we really don't have all the answers. It is only when the vision is rendered in translation rather than in the original Hebrew that makes it possible for us today to understand how angels can shape-shift into spaceships. What we do know is that God gave the vision so that we could visualize somewhat in our minds the glory associated with this great being, his appearance and his mode of travel. If anyone has doubts that Ezekiel's vision is of God enthroned upon the shape-shifted spacecraft Cherubim, consider what Ezekiel says in the final description in this passage in verse 28. Such was the appearance of the glory of the Lord. Then a few verses later in chapter 2, it was said to Ezekiel, Son of man, I am sending you to the children of Israel, to a rebellious nation that has rebelled against me. Chapter 2, verse 3. It is ironic that Ezekiel recognized this vision to be a message from God, yet over 2,500 years after this vision, modern-day UFO hunters want to reinterpret Ezekiel's original understanding of what he saw and claim that this is an extraterrestrial, quote-unquote, UFO sighting of some alien race from another planet or galaxy. And Satan has blinded their minds to think that this type of technology can only come from otherworldly beings from space. If you haven't done so yet, I highly recommend that you go ahead and listen to my podcast, Aliens Come from the Spirit Realm, Not from Outer Space. What you need to know about the spirit realm. Unlike human beings that are very limited in their physical, fleshly, and material bodies, angelic beings were created with a supernatural ability to shapeshift and transform into anything they want to at will. Hence, that's what Hollywood's Transformers film series is really trying to depict in these so-called sci-fi films and movies. The ability that the angelic realm has to transform into a person, object, or vehicle on a whim. Haven't you noticed that when you or someone has captured the image of a UFO on a video cam, you freak out to see how suddenly the image morphs from some sort of craft into a dragon or some other thing, etc.? Right? This happens because the fallen angels who come from their spirit realm in the second heaven, where most of the dark forces and principalities and powers of darkness dwell, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high heavenly places. Ephesians 6:12. While God and his holy angels and archangels dwell in the third heaven, they simply cannot retain their original shape for too long once inside our Earth's atmosphere, so they get all discombobulated and sort of wacky when captured live on a camera. As a matter of fact, in the Shield of the Sun YouTube video, Aliens Come from Hell, they show an image of one of them that had shapeshifted into a bow, like the sword you put on a gift box, on the lunar surface. This is why Paul wrote this in 2 Corinthians 11 verses 14 through 15. And no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore it is no great thing if his ministers, the fallen angels under him, also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their works. Ezekiel's description of the vision ties in perfectly with other apocalyptic writings such as Daniel and Revelation. The entire vision is not something taught in modern denominational religions. It should be though, because it will make God distinctively more real than the fuzzy image portrayed by most pastors and ministers, again Satan's ministers, in this world's churches, as well as UFO enthusiasts. Meditate on the description of the spectacular vehicle God writes in. This is God's spaceship, and this vision shall make the God of the Bible come alive to you. Until next time, this is Apostle Cherubim saying, goodbye, friends. You have heard the messenger of the Lord with Apostle Cherubim, preparing the way for the return of Jesus Christ. For more information on this podcast and this program, you may write us by email at Cherubim, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. Again, that is Cherubim, ESHURUM, Apostle of the Lord, at AOL.com. This podcast was sponsored by the New Radio Church of God and the Plain and Simple Truth Ministries, and by the free will offerings, tithes, and donations of those who are listeners of this podcast and are supporters of this great work of God. The preceding program has been a Plain and Simple Truth Ministries presentation.